Anthony, you're at a different location. You're not in your living room.
Oh, no. That's right. That's right. So, yeah, last time I taught for Lotus, it was your first weekend webinar that had to be broadcast from a home studio instead of your studios in the City of Industry because of COVID. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a wild week. I remember I was going to all set to fly down, and on Friday and Wednesday morning, the TSA announced that 4 workers at San Jose Airport had tested positive for COVID. God. And I appreciate that eLotus canceled said just do it from home. I think you were ahead of the curve on that. So
yeah, and now we're back, and so I'm back. I did go back to the office to work, but because of the numbers getting so high, we're back to working from home remotely. It's just the safest option right now.
Indeed.
Hey, Donna, when you get ready, we can start.
Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to our eLotus webinar today. My name is Donna, and I will be your host and your moderator for today's class. For over 2 decades, eLotus has been your trusted source for TCM continuing education for acupuncturists. We offer the largest selection of online CEU courses with over 3,000 CE hours. If you are new to eLotus, remember to sign up today for an eLotus account and receive a free 1 CEU course as a welcome gift. This offer is valid for new accounts only. If you're a big fan of learning new things, visit our TCM Wisdom Tube to find all of our archived 1-hour weekday webinar videos. Plus, you can find other free helpful resources such as articles and our TCM COVID-19 resources. Is your license up for renewal soon? No worries. We've got you covered with our acupuncture CEU bundles. Fulfill your CE requirements quickly. We currently have bundles for California, NCCAOM, Florida, and Texas. All right, so before we get started, let me give you a quick introduction of Anthony Vondermal. Anthony specializes in sports, orthopedic, and neuromusculoskeletal injuries and pain conditions. He has over 15 years of clinical experience as a sports massage therapist, physical therapy aide, athletic training assistant, and licensed acupuncturist in multidisciplinary clinics, including SpineMed Associates and the Prime Pain Medicine Institute. Well, he's here today to teach us some of his ethical clinical pearls with us. So let's go ahead and give him a big warm welcome. Anthony, you can go ahead and take over your screen. Take over the webinar screen.
So do I go to share screen now or? Oh, yes. There I am. Okay. Very good. I'll share a screen and bring up the slides in a moment. I'll just briefly introduce myself in person via camera view. Thank you very much for the invitation, Donna, to teach and for the introduction. And this is a subject which, quite frankly, is not fun for any of us to study and not fun for any of us to review. But on the other hand, it's critically important for both ourselves and our patients, our profession, and our practice. And this is going to be a 2-hour version of a class that usually I've taught before as 8 or 16 hours. And because of the constraints of time, I'm not going to be able to answer every question that everyone has. This is a controversial topic and typically does bring up a lot of questions, a lot of anxiety and concerns. And I'm not going to go through every single slide, but the slides are going to be available for you. And at the end of the presentation, you'll have my contact information if you have additional questions that I wasn't able to get to during the course of today's lecture. So without spending any further time on the introduction, I'm just going to go straight to my slides here. And there we go. Okay. So, let's see. Do I need to? Okay. I'm sorry. This is going to take just a moment here. I thought we had this all debugged, but okay. Let me go back to here. I guess I can just scroll through here. Oh, no. Sorry about this. Apologize. I thought I had it all lined up, and that's what we want to look at. And if I can't get this to scroll through slides, I may need some help, Donna. I thought we had it. There we go. Okay. All right. So.
Yeah, Anthony, can I interject?
Yes.
Do you want to download the PowerPoint that they sent back to you? I think you should be downloaded into your desktop.
Okay.
And then running from there, so that way we don't see the Gmail that in the background.
I think this is it, but
Oh, okay. On the right side,
okay.
towards your right, you see a little, download. Yeah, just download it.
Okay. I'm on a Mac. I don't know if this will work because I've never used OpenOffice to display a PowerPoint presentation. Are you able to see it just as is? If you're able to see it, I think the best thing is for me to stick with it and scroll through, because otherwise we'll get into the wilderness of Mac compatibility.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. All right. Okay. I apologize if it's less than optimal, but I think this is going to be better than me taking up our valuable time with trying to debug Mac PowerPoint interface. So, okay. So, how and why did I get personally into this? I want to just give you my perspective so that you understand where I'm coming from on this very important subject. I graduated from the Five Branches University TCM and started practicing both in private practice and also in physician-led clinics in 2003. And around 2009, a couple things happened simultaneously. One is that I just happened to notice on the California Acupuncture Board website a call for what are called expert witnesses to render opinions to the Acupuncture Board as to whether or not a complaint that had been lodged against an acupuncturist was essentially a valid and actionable complaint, whether somebody was practicing outside the laws and regulations, was committing an ethical or legal violation, et cetera. And that just interested me. So I submitted a resume and said, yeah, I'd be interested in doing that. And around the same time, I actually suffered what I would consider an actionable injury from another acupuncturist. I was getting treated for back pain. And without going into too many details, the acupuncturist used a 3-edge needle to bleed an engorged vein at the back of around bladder 39 and sliced into a peripheral nerve and caused some really painful spasming and cramping in my leg. And I was hobbling around my own clinic for a couple of weeks trying to pretend to patients that nothing was wrong. I didn't want to explain that I'd been injured by acupuncture, but it was not getting any better and the pain was keeping me awake at night. I finally went into urgent care and luckily encountered a very sort of sympathetic doctor who didn't make fun of me for being an acupuncturist, being injured by another acupuncturist, but who advised me that over time, this peripheral nerve injury would likely very slowly heal. And after about 6 months, it felt about 90% back to normal, but it's never been entirely the same. So I could have filed a complaint to the Acupuncture Board. I could have filed a malpractice suit. I chose not to. I chose to focus just simply on my energy on healing my injury. But if I'd been a layperson or somebody else, I might very well have sued that patient and complained to the Acupuncture Board. So between those two things, that got me interested in this field. And since then, I've continued to serve for the Acupuncture Board as what they now call a subject matter expert, and also as an expert witness I've played a formal role in about 15 civil malpractice cases, representing both patients and defendants, the defendants being other licensed acupuncturists in multiple states, many of them California, but some in other states as well. And I've served as a consultant to acupuncturists when they're being investigated by a regulatory agency or an insurer in other states as well as California. So one thing I want to be clear about is that that conflict of interest laws will prevent me from serving on any case that involves any of you as students. If I have a personal pre-existing relationship, including professional relationship as student-teacher, then there's conflict of interest laws that mean that I could not serve I can't help you, I can't hurt you. I can't serve either on defense or on the plaintiff's side. So that's the good news and bad news for you. Let's see what I want to go on to here. So this topic overlaps with a bunch of other very important subjects, but we're going to look at all of them through the lens of ethics and risk management. But it encompasses pretty much everything we do in a clinical practice. And these slides you can go back and look at in your own time, or we might go back if we have time. But I just want to be clear about what the distinction is between ethics, laws, and standards of care. And all of these factor into risk management for us. So laws is the easiest to understand. They're voted on by legislatures, and any given agency that's tasked by a state legislature with regulating a profession will then put out regulations that define in detail exactly how the legislation is supposed to be carried out. Okay, and this is very specific to your jurisdiction. Now, my experience as a clinician is entirely in California. California has roughly a third of the acupuncturists in the country. But for those of you that are zooming in from elsewhere in the country or in the world, the best I can suggest to you is you really need to know the laws and regulations of your particular jurisdiction. But most of the principles that I'm going to bring up are going to apply pretty much no matter where you are. But that's laws. The ethics are adopted by professional associations to define and encourage ethical practices. And these are pretty much independent of person, time, and place. They vary from country to country, perhaps with culture, but are not really defined by laws and regulations. And then we have what's perhaps the hardest to understand, which is standards of care. And that means what a reasonable professional would do. And it's specific to the profession and the locale, but it's not the same as majority rule. So for example, say the majority of acupuncturists, it turns out in the study, don't wash their hands in between treatment. That doesn't mean that because the majority of acupuncturists don't do it, that it's not the standard of care. It is the standard of care, and that's very clearly defined in our clean needle technique manual, in our training in schools, by OSHA, et cetera. So it's the standard whether or not the majority of acupuncturists in any given locale actually observe it, that standard. So standards of care is kind of made up of a lot of other things, laws and regulations, ethics, and what we might say common sense, textbooks and guidelines, instruction in schools or in continuing education at any level, also by the kinds of expert opinions that people like myself write, legal contracts that acupuncturists develop with insurance companies or their employers, and industry guidelines like coding manuals, employee and clinic manuals, et cetera. So standards of care is more amorphous, but it is very important when it comes to determining whether or not somebody has committed malpractice. So for our profession in the US, as I'm sure almost all of you know, or all of you know, is defined by the NCCAOM Code of Ethics. The latest version was adopted in 2016 by the NCCAOM. And as those of you who are diplomats of the NCCAOM, you already have had to pass test questions that include this. And we're not going to review all the 9 clauses in the Code of Ethics. I'm going to focus on those where acupuncturists most commonly commit ethical lapses, either inadvertently or accidentally, or perhaps on purpose. Okay. So, Sam and Donna, are we doing okay in terms of sound and pace and questions in the chat room, et cetera, before we go into any more detail?
We are doing good.
We're doing good. All right, very good. Okay, so a very important concept here. This may seem obvious, but it's not. What is it that actually establishes a patient-practitioner relationship? Well, that's pretty obvious when a patient books an appointment, comes in, fills out your intake forms, agrees to all your terms and conditions, signs on the bottom line, and hands you a check or a credit card or whatever, pays you. But what about things like treating your spouse or your roommate or a student if you're a teacher, or your teacher if you're a student, or cheating your office staff, your receptionist? Okay, so in those kinds of gray areas, you are best advised to have an explicit understanding in writing, although that may seem really awkward and uncomfortable with your spouse, et cetera. But here's the thing, is that malpractice insurance data shows that a disproportionate number of very serious complaints actually come out of these kinds of more intimate and sticky relationships where both parties assume that, if something goes wrong, well, we'll just kind of work it out and we're friends or we're family or, colleagues or whatever. And yet the paradox is that when an injury does occur, the hurt is often much deeper and more profound, leading to a greater sense of having been wronged by somebody who you deeply trusted, and more likely to actually result in a suit or a complaint to a regulatory board. Now, other examples of this might be sort of if you give sample or mini treatments at a health fair, you want to have somebody sign a waiver that you're not taking them on as a patient. This is for demonstration and educational purposes only, and also free demonstration treatments in an educational context. Okay. And so, increasingly schools and continuing education providers understand this, that if somebody comes in for a demonstration treatment, they need to have them sign a waiver too, saying that the practitioner is teaching, not taking them on as a patient. Okay. So, one of the cases that I served on was a very sticky, very messy case where the acupuncturist was treating their receptionist, which I know all the marketing classes tell you is a great idea. So your receptionist can sell your services to your patients. That's basically turning a receptionist into a sales agent, which is ethically very questionable and probably actually not, quite frankly, not ethical. It may be good for marketing, but that's not the same as ethical. It is legal, but if something goes wrong, which in this case it did, the receptionist, they know everything about your practice and they know exactly what you're up to. And they're in quite a position to cause tremendous trouble for you as an acupuncturist, whether or not you're in the right or in the wrong. Okay. So be very, very careful about that. And it's best to have a very explicit understanding. Are you or are you not taking on this person in a professional context? And I would err on the side of basically, if you stick needles in people, if you do something that is regulated by your scope of practice, you're wearing a lab coat, whether or not it's a physical lab coat that the patient can see or the other person can see. You're assuming a professional role in relationship to them. And that point forward, you need to act professionally and not just personally with regard to giving them advice, treating them, et cetera, rendering diagnoses and so on. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Anthony, for a great class today, and thank you, everyone, for joining us. I hope you learned a lot from today's class, and there was a lot of takeaways for you.